Welcome back to episode 4 of Spider-Man Origins, and this one is titled Infamous. The episode begins with Peter standing inside the Daily Bugle, amazed by the atmosphere around him. He is soon welcomed by an employee, and Peter tells her that he has some photos for Mr. Jameson. The woman tells him that Jonah's a little busy right now and will see him whenever he gets the chance, but soon after, Robbie spots Peter from a distance and invites him over. Peter explains how he has some photos of Spider-Man and that he believes Jameson will be interested in purchasing them from him. He shows Robbie the photos, and he's amazed by how perfectly Peter was able to get Spider-Man in the frame and suggests that he present them to Jonah as soon as possible. The two walk into Jonah's office, and he doesn't seem too happy to see Peter, immediately shouting, asking him what he wants. Peter tells Jonah that he has some photos of Spider-Man for him, and Jonah yells back, telling him to hand them over. He looks through them for a moment before tossing them onto the counter and offering Peter $150 for all of them. Peter tells Jonah that the ad said $300, but Jonah tells Peter that the ad said $300 for anyone who can get some good photos of Spider-Man. Robbie confronts Jonah, telling him that Peter was the first person to have brought in any pictures of Spider-Man and that they're actually a lot better than what he was expecting, considering he not only found but was able to get a clear picture of the masked man swinging across the city. And after a few moments, Jonah submits and agrees to give Peter the full $300 in return for the photos of Spider-Man. When Peter gets home, he's excited to tell Aunt May about his new job, and although he hasn't been hired yet and nothing's official, he's still happy that he can finally help Aunt May in terms of money. At first, she tries to tell Peter that it's his money and that he should be the one to keep it, but Peter insists that it be used to help pay for bills. Eventually, the two come to the agreement that Peter can help May with her money problems as long as he remembers to keep some of each paycheck for himself to start saving for university. This scene is meant to express how strong the relationship between Peter and his aunt is and how they almost always have each other's best interests in mind. Even amongst the difficult circumstances, they would both rather see each other succeed as opposed to themselves. When Peter goes upstairs to his room, he can't help but feel satisfied with his life as Spider-Man, and we get a short montage of him taking pictures of himself posing in front of the mirror in his Spider-Man suit. This is not only meant to show the spunky side to Peter, but also reinstates the increased level of confidence this new persona has given him. The next day when Peter gets to school, he overhears Flash talking to his friends about Spider-Man. It almost seems as if overnight his classmates have turned against Spider-Man with the exception of Flash. Peter sticks around for a moment trying to make sense of the sudden change in opinion when Flash asks him what he thinks about it. Peter replies in confusion before Flash hands him a paper from the Daily Bugle. The headline reads, "Spider-Man involved in store robbery, citizens call for Webhead's arrest," and has a small text displaying that the photos were taken by Peter Parker. He glances at the paper for a few moments before looking back up at Flash. Flash tells him that he was there and would have seen the whole thing, and Peter then explains what really happened, telling the crowd that Spider-Man was just swinging by and happened to come across a robbery in progress. He tells them that Spider-Man was the one who stopped the crime and that the person who wrote the story must have gotten things mixed up, and Flash looks back at everyone for approval, but not all of them seem to be buying it, one of them being Harry, who was dragged into the conversation partway through in the background of the shot. Although Harry likes the idea of a superhero swinging around town saving people and stopping crimes, he's still a bit skeptical and doesn't understand why someone would go through the trouble of putting themselves in danger for the good of others, which is partly due to his upbringing. Nevertheless, Randy and MJ agree with Flash and choose to believe the best of him. Later that day in math class, we see Peter and Harry working next to each other on an assignment, and in this scene, Harry asks him how Aunt May's holding up, and he tells him that she's doing pretty good. He then asks Harry if his father ended up facing any backlash for the incident with Otto at Oscorp, and Harry tells Peter that since there were no outside adults in the building at the time to witness the accident, Oscorp has yet to have received any charges. Peter tells Harry that that's good and that he believes it was all an accident and wasn't anyone's fault in the first place, secretly knowing that the spider that absorbed the radioactive energy in the first episode was the real cause. Shortly after, the school bell rings and Peter heads to the gym for his next class. The group is currently partaking in a basketball unit, and once class starts, the teacher takes attendance and notices that both Flash and Randy aren't there despite having been in their morning classes earlier that day. On the other end of the school, we get to see where Flash and Randy really are. In the morning, when Flash found out about Peter having taken pictures of Spider-Man, he got the idea to look through Peter's camera in search of some more photos that he could use to get his name alongside Spider-Man's in the paper and earn a little cash as a bonus. Most of Flash's plans tend not to be too well thought out, and this happens to be one of them. In this scene, he and Randy are standing in front of Peter's locker, and Flash, having not prepared for any problems that may arise, is confused when he sees that Peter's locker is locked. Luckily for him, Randy came prepared and uses a lockpick to quickly remove the padlock guarding Peter's locker, and when Flash opens the door and grabs the camera, he begins to look through the photos Peter had taken the previous day. To his surprise, the first photo contains Peter standing in front of his bedroom mirror in a red and blue Spider-Man suit, and Flash laughs for a second, thinking that Peter must also be a major Spider-Man fan when an announcement comes over the loudspeakers requesting for Flash Thompson and Randy Robertson to return to the gym immediately. Flash is heard saying, "Oh no, not again," before quickly dropping the camera and rushing back to the gym, thinking that there is nothing of value to be found in Peter's archives. Randy glances back at Flash before picking up the camera and taking another look at the photo of Peter unmasked in his Spider-Man suit. Being the smarter of the two, he becomes suspicious of Peter and takes off with the camera before heading back to the gym. Later, during a basketball scrimmage, Peter ends up dunking on Flash, and after he asks him when he got so good at basketball, and after that, Peter tries to refrain from using his powers because he doesn't want anyone to become suspicious of his sudden drastic increase in talent, paired with the fact that he is known to have taken photos of Spider-Man. After school, Peter grabs his things from his locker, noticing that his camera is nowhere to be seen, and later that night he spends the rest of his wrestling and bugle money on purchasing a new camera. In Peter's life, it seems as if whenever something's going well, it's not long before it's taken from him, and this is a prime example of that. When Peter leaves the camera shop, he soon spots a black car driving recklessly through the city as an array of cop cars come trailing behind in a high-speed chase. Instinctively, he changes into a Spider-Man suit and swings toward the thieves in an attempt to catch them. When Spider-Man passes by one of the cars, he makes a quick joke when shortly after a cop begins to yell at him, saying that he's a vigilante and a public menace. They warn him that they'll shoot if he doesn't stop, but Spider-Man continues to swing toward the criminals. We then get a slow-motion close-up of the cop shooting at Spider-Man, with the camera following closely behind the bullet as it travels toward our hero. Far in the distance, we see Spider-Man's spidey sense visually begin to tingle when he notices what's happening and barely evades the flying bullet. He yells back at the cop before latching onto the black car with a web and slowly veering it away from bystanders. At one point, he pushes a couple of civilians out of the way with the help of his webs, and once he's finally stopped the car, the criminals get out and start attacking him. As he avoids their blows, he secretly webs his camera to the side of a nearby building before easily taking down the criminals. Shortly after, the police arrive and start yelling at Spider-Man to back off, and he asks them what's the matter, and they respond by saying that they know what he's up to, mentioning the Spider-Man paper produced by the Daily Bugle, and more specifically J. Jonah Jameson. Spider-Man tries to clear things up, but the officers don't seem to be buying it either. Spidey realizes that he's getting nowhere with this and swings out of sight, retrieving his camera along the way. Peter swings over to the Daily Bugle and tells Jonah that he's got some more photos for him, and thinks that he may have misunderstood what Spider-Man was doing in the photos he had given him the previous day that had made it into the paper. Jonah tells Peter that there is no misunderstanding, that he has to address all possibilities of the story, good and bad. He says that it's his job to warn the citizens of New York if something dangerous might be out there, and in this situation that seems to be the case. He says that if he doesn't speak the news as it is or as it could be, he would be a bad reporter. With a little convincing from Robbie, he then offers Peter the part-time job Robbie mentioned in episode 2, and is told that it's because for some reason Spider-Man likes to pose for him. He then tells Peter that this will only work out if Peter sticks to taking the pictures and lets him write the papers, and he agrees to the offer. And when Peter leaves, we hear Robbie quietly tell Jonah that lately his son's been getting home late and that his grades have been steadily declining. He says that he thinks something's wrong, and because Jonah's already raised a son, he's asking him for advice. Jonah seems to genuinely care about Robbie and tries to tell him that this is something most boys go through and that they'll eventually grow out of it. He says that it's important to just sit down and talk with this kid, as that's something Jonah finally learned to do with his son John in his later teenage years, and doesn't want Robbie to make the same mistake. Nevertheless, John turned out pretty well, and a photo of him in an astronaut suit can often be seen sitting on his desk. After the conversation comes to a close, the scene cuts to a shot at Oscorp with Norman and the mysterious man from episode 1. Although we still aren't able to see his face, we do know that he's been referred to in the past as the Chameleon and tends to wear a blue suit. He approaches Norman and tells him that the job's been finished, as he hands him a memory card that supposedly has the only copy of the video file of the incident at Oscorp recorded by Peter back in episode 1. Norman asks him how it was done, and the man replies stating that for the past week he's taken on the form of a classmate of Peter's, as choosing a family member would have been too obvious and recognizable. He says that he specifically chose someone Peter didn't have close relations to, but respected enough to have around. The man then mentions that the real victim has been contained and unconscious for the past week and won't remember the incident whatsoever, as he will also be hypnotized into believing any required information for coming back to his normal life, allowing him to do his work without fear of detection. Norman tells the man that he's impressed before grabbing a large briefcase of cash from a safe and handing it to him. At the same moment, we hear a loud crash come from an upper floor before an alarm goes off. Norman races to see what the problem is, and as he walks into the room, we see a large hole in the wall leading to the outside city as he glances toward an empty medical bed. You then get a shot of a blank screen with the subtitle 30 seconds ago, and shortly after the screen fades to a monitor displaying a normal looking heart rate before it suddenly increases drastically, cutting to a close-up of the eyes of Otto Octavius shooting open before the screen turns black. But anyway, that is going to do it for episode 4 of Spider-Man Origins. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all in the next one. I'm out.